You are listening to the Beyond the High Road podcast with Shelby Milford, episode number 166. Welcome to Beyond the High Road, a podcast dedicated to healing your heart and life following the grief of alienation. I'm your host, Shelby Milford, a twice certified life coach specializing in post-traumatic growth. If you're experiencing the effects of alienation and you're ready to heal, then this show is my love letter to you. Stay tuned. Well, hi. How are we doing today? So today we're going to be talking about your happiness set point. This is a topic that I've been planning for since, this summer, like the end of the summer, maybe August. And it's finally here today. So I'm going to read you my little spiel that I wrote a little earlier, and then we will get into the episode, just a little intro that I have here. So as an alienated parent, you know, I'm sure, the ache of standing on the outside, looking in at your own child's life, as everyone else expects you to just move on. In the beginning, you probably wondered if you're the only one who wakes up with an emptiness that words can't capture. Maybe you were convinced that you were the only parent who mourned a child had lost while they were just miles away from your home. That's what I was like. I was convinced I was the only one. No words to actually describe the pain you were feeling, and no defined grieving protocol to follow, like I was talking about in last week's episode, right? Week after week, y'all show up to listen because together we're walking this invisible road through loss and ambiguous grief. Today, we're opening up the science on happiness. Yes, even here, because your ability to feel joy did not end the day that your relationship with your child changed. We'll dig into why your happiness set point feels out of reach, how ambiguous loss makes healing especially tough, and what the latest research says about reclaiming your well-being, even in the longest seasons of quote-unquote waiting. You are not alone. You're not broken, and there are real strategies for finding a new kind of meaning and joy right in the thick of all this uncertainty. So let's get into it. All right, so my first introduction ever to the science of happiness was back in Texas with a friend of mine named David. I don't remember who I was talking with this about, like, somewhat recently. I don't know if it was on the podcast or if it was with one of my clients. But anyway, so one of my friends is the head of the philanthropy department at University of Texas. And back when, I think it was right after the last court hearing, either it was the last one or the second to last one, I was in a lot of pain at that time. It was at the point where it must have been right after the last one because I didn't think that I had anywhere else to turn. I was at the bottom of the bottom, like I couldn't go any further in my mind. The world was really dark. And I was so desperate to make something of the whole situation. At that time, I didn't want to accept that this is where I was. I needed to make meaning out of it. And so I wanted to start this nonprofit for kids who were being alienated from their parents. And I got in contact with my friend Dave. I figured he would know what my next steps were as far as making this 501c3. He invited me to lunch. We went to the UT club, sat down, and I remember feeling I was already in like a pretty big stress response because I knew I was going to have to broach the subject regarding what was going on with me. And I was still in that place where it felt so embarrassing. And I hadn't done all the work that I today have. And so I knew that in order to get to my point of the foundation that I was getting ready to start, I needed to give him my backstory. And so once I started to put it all together in words for him, he stopped me and he asked me, posed a question to me. And I know that looking back on it, and maybe I knew back then, that when he posed that question, he wasn't wanting an answer for himself, but more, I think he was trying to help me to gain some awareness around what was going on with me, right? He said something to the effect of, most of the people that he hears about starting a foundation or doing anything with grief or immense pain that they've gone through, they're the most successful when they have gotten through the pain and the darkness and to the other side, and they're sitting on top of the mountain as opposed to being in the valley, right? And he said, have you gotten to the point where you're looking back on all this? And I can remember feeling, it wasn't his fault, but I remember feeling like devastated in that moment and embarrassed. There was a lot of shame that was going on. Again, it wasn't him that did it. The way that he posed the question was very friendly, loving, however, you know? So when he asked the question, that's when I realized that I was nowhere near even close. I knew that I had my work cut out for me, and I knew that I had to sit with this pain. And that didn't seem fun for me at all. I didn't even know where to start, you know? I thought it would be much easier to help other people. And I think that that's why so many of us are in the boat that we're in, is because we were always directing our attention outward and not allowing for whatever's going on with us to be, you know? But anyway, that's besides the point. So that was, needless to say, that was the last he and I spoke about my nonprofit, right? Instead, I decided to switch the subject out of probably immense embarrassment to ask him about the classes he teaches and so on and so forth. And so he then told me that he teaches this class, The Science of Happiness. And I was like, what? The science of happiness? That sounds crazy to me. It sounded ridiculous. At that point, I thought the world was super dark. You know, I saw the world as a really hostile place, to the point where, like, if I saw a pregnant woman walk past me, I would judge her and think, what a terrible thing. Why would she bring a baby into this awful, dark world? It's a terrible time to do so. You know, I was in a place. Everything I saw was dark and people were evil and out for their own selves. The world was just not a safe place in my mind back then. Okay. But I was truly intrigued by by the fact that he taught this class about the science of happiness and also about the philanthropy, right? I thought how interesting. There was something just so magnetic about him. And so we had been introduced through friends. We just started to get together now and then to run trails. One of them was right behind his house in Austin. Austin has great technical running trails. And so we would go running together on these trails. And I kept asking him, I was fascinated by the fact that people would pay money, university type money, to take a class about the science of happiness. I thought it was crazy. It was like basket weaving to me. It was like, it didn't make sense, you know? But that's the first time I was ever introduced to the science of happiness. And so I learned a little bit from him about where it started, what it's about, and there's actually a lot more entailed in it than I once thought. So that's what I'll give you about that. But I guess the reason why I wanted to tell you that little story is because I know that for most people, the idea of studying happiness sounds absolutely ridiculous and almost frivolous, especially coming from what we have. So just know that I've been there too. I was very skeptical about this. But in a few minutes, I'm going to lay out some information for you, some empirical evidence from studies starting in 1971, which is when the study, The Science of Happiness, began, and all the way through. But first, I want to say that if you guys, I even mentioned it last week in many of the other episodes, you guys know my thoughts about the term happiness. It's different for each of us, right? Our interpretations. But in my definition, you can define it however you want. Happiness is just this state of mind or this idea that we know that we're on the path that we want to be on, right? That we're going in the quote unquote right direction. The language that I usually use is like your frequency or your energetic level, like your energetic set point, you know? But they're pretty much interchangeable. It's just that in psychology, the empirical evidence lies in the language being your happiness set point. Okay. So when I'm using happiness set point today, you can also interchange that with like your emotional guidance scale, a vibrational set point, anything like that. It's just a typical emotional band that you live within. Okay. Like, for instance, some people land in between worry and boredom. And some people, their set point will be between contentment and appreciation, or between anxiety and anger, maybe. Also, the way that maybe you've heard me talk about it, but what I bring my clients through is I ask them to lay out for me, and like usually one of the first few sessions, what are their current top emotions? Not top like chosen, well, they are chosen, but like not desired emotions, but what are the most frequent emotions they feel on an everyday basis, right? Or in the last week, what are the most common emotions that you feel? And then after they go through some questioning, then I ask them, what are the top three of the emotions that you want to feel, like your desired emotions? And so that helps us to determine, like right in the beginning, where they are as far as their emotional band. Okay. So just know that when we're talking about the happiness set point, it's just a baseline state that you adapt to. I just wanted to put that out there now for you guys so that it wasn't confusing. My message wasn't confusing compared to some of the other episodes where I do talk about what my definition of happiness is. Okay. So it's all kind of interchangeable. This is just where the empirical evidence lies. Okay. So back in 1971, there was a concept, actually, it was a theory that was proposed by two guys, Berkman and Campbell. One was a Canadian, one was an American. They coined the term hedonic treadmill in a paper they wrote. Hedonic treadmill is also sometimes known as hedonic adaptation. They're one and the same. Their thesis proposed that humans quickly return to a relatively stable level of happiness despite major positive or negative events or life changes. Much like sensory adaptation, where if you walk into a room and you smell something, whether that's good or bad or whatever the smell is, after a little bit of time, what's coming to me right now is like, you ever walked into somebody's house and it really smells, but they don't seem to be bothered, but that's because they have just over time adapted to that smell and that smell becomes normal to them. This is what back in 1971, these two guys, their theory was that happiness or your emotional happiness set point is fixed, and we can have something happen outside of us and we can go up or down, higher frequency or lower frequency, happier or less happy, but eventually we'll return back to that baseline. That was their theory. That was the first major or documented research study on happiness. And then one of those guys went on to do the landmark lottery study. This one was done in 1978, and this study compared the self-reported happiness levels of recent lottery winners, right? They came into some money. There were recently paraplegic or quadriplegic accident victims, and then there was a control group. And so the major findings of that study is after 1 year, I believe, they found that the people that won the lotteries were not significantly happier overall than the control group. Okay. And they actually, the lottery winners, took less pleasure from the daily mundane events than the other two groups. Okay. The control group and the accident victims. Paraplegics were only modestly less happy than their neighbors, than either of the other groups. But they still scored above the midpoint on the happiness scale and were expected to return to the similar happiness levels as the control group within a few years. So what I'm saying is, within a year's time, all of them basically returned back to their set point. Okay? And what was interesting to me is that those that won the lottery found less joy or happiness when they were conversing with friends or getting a phone call from somebody or doing the little things that cause most people little micro joys, micro moments of joy. They weren't nearly as entertained with the little things, I guess, because of that spike of winning the lottery. It's kind of like what's coming to me right now is like you hear about drug addicts, those who have just gotten over an addiction, their serotonin levels are dysregulated. It takes a bigger jolt for them to experience the highs, right? Because they have already experienced such extreme highs that nothing really compares to that until their brain re-regulates. That's kind of what I think about with this one study. The whole point of that is that both groups demonstrated that people adapt to both good and bad circumstances more completely than intuition might suggest. Then in 1996, there was a twin study. So there was 1,000 sets of twins that were followed for over a 10-year period. The study concluded that approximately 50% of happiness levels are determined by genetics. 50% of everybody's happiness levels, we are predisposed to it. This study and this finding actually established the set point theory, the idea that each person has a genetically influenced baseline around which their happiness fluctuates. So then in 2006, there was a paper that was written. It was called Beyond the Hedonic Treadmill, and it was proposing 5 revisions to the original model. 1, different set points. People have different baseline happiness levels. They're not all the same. It's not all one set neutral point. 2 is that there's multiple set points. People can have different baselines for different components of well-being. So if you're in the area of like work life or in the area of social, romantic, whatever, you can have multiple set points. Okay. 3 is that set points can change. Under some circumstances, set points can shift permanently. 4 is individual adaptation rates. People differ in how quickly they adapt to life changes. I think that we all kind of know this. Everybody's a little bit different in how they process information, what things set them back. Everybody's different. And then 5 is asymmetric adaptation. Basically, that people adapt differently to positive versus negative events. Adaptation to negative events is often slower and less complete. This research offered the idea that creating a happier society is not just doomed by only one set point. Okay. And you're always going to return to whatever baseline, and that baseline is the same for everybody, which was a very basic model. Right around the same time in the 2000s, early 2000s, there was a lady named Sonia Lubomirsky. I'm probably saying that wrong, but she did research that proposed a pie chart model of happiness determinants. She maintains that your genetic background was responsible for 50% of your happiness. She then said that life circumstances, things that happen outside of you, are responsible for 10%. 10%, not much. And if you work with me, then you know that circumstances actually are neutral and can't really cause any of it. But let's just leave it as it is because this is our research, okay? Then the amazing news, the solution news, is that intentional activities were responsible for the remaining 40%. Intentional activities are what is responsible for 40% of your happiness. So this framework became foundational in positive psychology, suggesting that while we cannot change our genes, nearly half of our happiness is within our control through deliberate daily choices and behaviors. And I would propose that the life circumstances, that other 10%, is also a non-issue, or it's not even relevant, because life circumstances actually don't need to determine anything for you. It's the way that you think about them. So that 10%, in my mind, I say 50% genetics, 50% intentional activities, and how you choose to think about things, which is fucking amazing news if you think about it. So you can rewire your brain. The whole takeaway from all of what I just said is that neuroplasticity, right? You can rewire your brain to have any set point really that you like with that other 50%. You can rewire your brain to have a lower set point and feel less happy, or a higher set point and be more happy by what you choose to see, by your perceptions. Of course, as you guys know, what I preach in each and every episode. I think, is it Heb that originally, I think back in the 50s, that neurons that fire together wire together? I think it was him, neuroscientist, that proposed that we can rewire our brains to achieve whatever mental, emotional status we want to have. And so we can train ourselves to see the things that are beautiful in the world, and we can also train our brains to see all the icky, nasty things, kind of like how I was, and whenever I was hanging out with my friend Dave, the professor. So then, most recent, and between 2019 and 2025, Sonia Lubomirsky, the one that's responsible for the sustainable happiness model, right? The 40% of intentional activities, she revisited that model. She was acknowledging some valid critiques of the original pie chart while maintaining that subsequent research has supported the most important premise, namely that individuals can boost their well-being via their intentional behaviors and maintain that boost in the longer term. Meaning that you're not just thinking for a certain way, thinking happy thoughts will only get you happy for a short period of time, and then you're going to go right back to whatever your baseline is at a less happy spot. She's saying that you can sustain that for longer periods of time, in fact, indefinitely. So then the 2025 World Happiness Report emphasizes that belief in others' kindness and social connection are now recognized as even stronger predictors of happiness than previously understood. Trust in community kindness was found to be twice as related to happiness as employment status. So you could be broke and out of a job, but if you trust in the kindness that is within those around you, it's found to be twice as influential to your happiness. So that's good news. Now, those of you who are still on the ho-hum and woe is me and the world is dark and everybody's awful place, that's where maybe if there's a gap there for you, that's where your focus can be if you're ready for it. And I want to say that now because as you guys, if you've been listening for a while, you know, but if you're a first time listener, please know that I am not suggesting that if you're smack in the middle of acute grief, like I was mentioning earlier, that you just shift over and try to find all the ways that you can be happy today and forget about all your grief and just be happy. I'm not saying that. Okay. It's just that depending on what you choose to see, where you put your intention, your focus, that is going to determine your experience. And if you pile all of those experiences up with intentional perceptions of your world, like, is this helping me or harming me? If you choose to go to the helpful place more, then it's going to bump up your quote unquote happiness set point over time. All right. So here's where our challenge comes in. So now we're going into part 2, ambiguous grief. Dr. Pauline Boss, she was a professor at University of Minnesota, coined the term ambiguous loss in the 1970s to describe the loss that remains unclear and has no resolution, right? Unlike death, which allows for funerals, rituals, like I was just referencing last week, and community support, ambiguous loss freezes the grief process and can continue for a lifetime. Okay? Can continue for a lifetime. I emphasize the can. So there are 2 types of ambiguous loss. Type 1 is the physical absence with psychological presence, right? This is when a loved one is physically missing or not present, but remains psychologically present in our minds, in our hearts. Examples include kidnapping, immigration, adoption, family estrangement, or alienation. I put in the alienation here because, of course, alienation isn't mentioned in most publications. Type 2 is psychological absence with physical presence, such as with dementia, addiction, mental illness. Why this matters for us. Alienation is a perfect example of ambiguous loss, like I was just kind of explaining. As we discussed last week, when we lose someone to death, there's support coming from all angles, right? Everybody's there for us, bringing casseroles, sending cards, offering to be there for us, sit with us. But when we have no contact with our children, it's crickets many times. You might even be blamed for it. I mean, you're definitely being blamed for it by the alienating parent, but maybe also what you thought was your support group. Okay? The grief is real, but there are no rituals to mark it. There are no casseroles, there are no bereavement cards. There's no protocol for how to move through this ongoing loss. This type of grief is sometimes called frozen grief for obvious reasons, because the uncertainty prevents the natural progression through mourning. This lack of closure doesn't just cause sadness, it creates chronic sorrow. Okay? Defined as the periodic recurrence of permanent, pervasive sadness associated with ongoing disparity resulting from a loss experience. Why ambiguous grief threatens the happiness set point. So Boss, the lady that I was just referencing here from University of Minnesota, she suggests that ambiguous loss poses particular threats to well-being because I'm quoting this, particular threats to well-being because the stressful situation cannot be resolved, right? The chronic nature of this grief can keep the grieving parent, us, stuck below our natural happiness baseline for extended periods. And then it also can prevent the adaptation process that normally allows people to return to their set point, like I was mentioning in the hedonic adaptation or treadmill, right? It also can create what researchers call the endless waiting that freezes the oscillation between hope and acceptance. Okay. I did an episode on that. I'll link it below, but I think it was called something like why ignoring your grief sometimes is the best answer or something. I'll link it below. It freezes the oscillation because you're waiting. You're like, I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when. I can't be happy the rest of my years. I'll never feel joy again, not until my kid comes back into my life, or whatever you might be saying. So it causes the happiness set point to lower. Neurons that fire together wire together, and whatever we put our minds to, whatever we're focusing on over and over repeatedly, whether it's that we're anchoring ourselves to our past, thinking about how things used to be, or if we're thinking about how bad things are now, either way, you're lowering your set point over and over if you're thinking those thoughts every day, all the time. So then now your set point is down in the dumps. Your happiness, your ability to feel it is low, if not non-existent. The key point for everything I just said is the hedonic treadmill research shows people typically adapt to major losses, but ambiguous loss is the exception. We're the exception to the rule, as I tell you all the time that we don't need to be. But because there's no clear event to adapt to, the grief keeps resurfacing with each quote unquote trigger or reminder. So now at part 3, the bridge, how understanding changes everything. Here's what makes ambiguous grief particularly cruel in light of the happiness research. The brain is designed to adapt, but it can only adapt to what it understands. Okay? Research shows that people cannot cope with a problem until they know what it is. By naming the experience as ambiguous loss, like I know that it's out there now, like many people have that language, many parents I see it in the Facebook groups and stuff like that, that this is a term that now has been out for a while. And I think it's become maybe not common knowledge for us as alienated parents, but we're getting there, But by naming the experience as that ambiguous loss, we can finally begin the coping process, being able to name it. Oh, this is what this is. Where I know most of us didn't have the name alienation. We didn't know what we were experiencing. To me, it was this Twilight Zone fucking Lifetime original movie craziness where I could not see my own kid. And there was this stepmother between us, blocking us and accusing me and creating this soap opera, like Jerry Springer sort of environment for myself and more importantly, my kiddo. Then back when I didn't understand what the fuck was going on, all I had was, and I'm sure with you too, just traumatic experience toppled on traumatic experience over and over and over. And that's why I think that so many of us get so jumbled up when we're talking with other people or trying to explain a series of events. Like it all starts to just get meshed together, trauma fog, that we all have because we have no words for it. Our children have no words for it. Probably most of you, even at current, they have no words for it. I don't mean to make that instill any sort of fear in you right now, but it's the truth. When we have worked for it, we can finally begin the process of healing. This is the first step towards potentially raising your happiness set point despite the ongoing uncertainty of your situation with your kiddos. So once you have the words for it and you keep reminding your nervous system of that, especially in the acute phase of your grief in the beginning, it's when you can find your footing. Like I'm thinking about me running track and having that start point where I put my, what are they called? Where you put your feet, the pedals that you put your feet on before you go. Those pedals are like what naming it is in my mind. It's like, okay, now we've got the foundation. I can name my experience and keep reminding my body. In fact, y'all, there are times where I still name that to myself. Like, hey, this is grief. It's okay. We're experiencing grief and we just had another wave. It's all right. I sometimes need to spell it out because when we're in a trauma response, most of the time it's a whirlwind, like a cyclone, tornado, and we're like swept away with it. And so when we're able to stop and name it, you can interrupt the pattern. There's the theory of chronic sorrow. I'm going to give you just a few pointers on this. Chronic sorrow is normal. It's not pathological. Basically, what I'm saying here is you're not crazy, or what this theory is saying. It's cyclical, not linear, as you probably know with grief. Quote unquote triggers are predictable and can be anticipated many times, right? Like anniversaries, holidays, milestones. Yeah, this is a theory that was developed by people that were not experiencing alienation. With us, of course, other quote unquote triggers, activations can happen with everyday things, and just pop up all of a sudden. So there's that. Okay. Being aware of that and reminding yourself that when it's happening, like you see a little girl walking by you that sounds. Yesterday, I was walking out of a store and I heard a little baby cough. And the cough, I mean, I guess and I was thinking about this afterwards. Many people would say a baby's cough all sounds the same, but I don't think that they do. And that cough sounded so similar to my daughter's cough. Not that she was coughing a lot, but it sounded like her. And it was like, oh, when my stomach did some swirls and I got tight in my throat and in my chest, got a little tired afterwards. That all of that happened. It was not predictable. But I reminded myself in the moment, this is normal. This is grief. I've had a lot of moments lately. Well, not a lot, but several. No, I would say quite a bit. And I don't know if maybe if it's for me, if it's just because we're around the holidays. Not every holiday is like that. Maybe I'm open to processing more now, like I was talking about last week. But I've been thinking about her a lot and dreaming about her a lot when she was little and then also now. So just as I'm saying that, just know too that a lot of our stuff is not predictable. In chronic sorrow, people have both internal coping strategies and can benefit from external support. Okay. So you can utilize and build on those internal abilities like thought work, breath work, things that you can do for yourself in your self contained little environment of you. Also, we can benefit from the help of others. When combined with happiness research, this suggests that while sorrow may be permanent, it doesn't have to permanently depress your overall happiness set point. The key lies in the intentional activities. I want to say that part again. While sorrow, grief, may be permanent or may be around forever, because even if, let's say, your kid comes back to you and y'all reignite your relationship, everything's back to, let's say, perfect. You feel like you're so connected and you're communicating on, a regular basis and all that. You still will probably hold grief for a long period of time about the years or the amount of time that you did miss the milestones and all that sort of stuff. There was a period of time where you either were in no contact or the contact was stressed. The connection was somewhat severed. So you still might hold the grief for that, even though things are fine. Anyway, so even though sorrow or grief may be permanent, it doesn't have to permanently depress your overall happiness set points. You can be in the middle of grief and also raise the bar for your happiness set point. The defining factor is like the lever that you can pull here to raise it all is your intentional activities. Part 4. So Boss developed 6 guidelines to build resilience despite ambiguous loss. I'm going to go through these really quickly with you, and then I'm going to go into what I think. Number 1 is finding meaning, making sense of what is happening by naming it as ambiguous loss, practicing a both and thinking rather than either or, black, white. So for us as alienated parents or estranged parents, some of you, my child is both here in my heart and in my mind, and also not present in my daily life, current life. Acknowledge both with an and. Another one could be, I am grieving and I'm finding moments of joy. Okay. This relationship is painful and I am growing. Okay. I cannot control this outcome and I can control my response. Those are some both ands. Number 2 is adjusting mastery. Accept that some things are beyond our control while identifying what is within your control. Kind of like the last example I just gave you. You cannot force reconciliation, but you can control how you respond. You can also control how you see it. And what is reconciliation? You can even question that. Does that mean that we have to actually connect, like physically communicate? Or can I reconcile within my own mind? You know, the answer to that is absolutely 100%. And in fact, I would offer that you would reconcile in your own mind way before the actual physical reconciliation ever happens. Okay. All right. Number 3, reconstructing your identity. Who am I now that this relationship has changed? This is essential work, moving from I am a parent who failed to I am a person navigating something profoundly difficult. Okay. 4 is normalizing ambivalence. It's normal to feel love and anger, hope and despair all at once. These mixed emotions are not weakness. They're appropriate responses to an ambiguous situation. Appropriate. It's appropriate discomfort and maybe comfort all at the same time. Number 5 is revising attachment. This does not mean letting go, but rather finding new ways to hold the relationship psychologically while living in the present reality. Number 6 is discovering new hope. This is, again, remember that this is Boss's 6 guidelines, okay? With my examples, of course. Discovering new hope. A meaningful life can emerge without closure. New hopes and dreams can develop when you increase your tolerance for ambiguity. You can increase your tolerance for all of it. All right, now I'm going to give you some evidence-based happiness interventions, practices that you can do. There's really strong evidence to support that gratitude practices, and I know we just came off last week when I was telling you that gratitude lists are not my first go-to, not if it's forced, but if you are open to it, finding things, renewing your contract is how I put it last week, with the things that are currently in your life as is. How are you in love with those things? How can you renew your love with those things? Writing down 3 good things daily for just 1 week can increase your happiness for up to 6 months. Just writing down 3 good things a day for just 1 week, and that will last you for 6 months. It's like in the bank. Okay? Imagine if you did that for all the weeks in a row. For 6 months, how long would you have for you guys? Somebody did a math on that. Be a long time, you know? 2025 meta-analysis synthesizing 145 studies across 28 countries confirms gratitude interventions result in reliable increases in well-being. They're most effective when practiced consistently and with specificity. I always talk about that with my clients and with y'all too. Be very specific with what it is that you want, where you're going, and also what's currently going on. Because if you're vague, your brain will throw it out. Okay? All right, mindfulness and meditation, also strong evidence to support. There's research at University of Wisconsin that demonstrates that meditation practices can change your brain structure and function, particularly in areas associated with emotional regulation. Even short-term practice, 2 to 8 weeks, shows measurable changes in well-being and gene expression. So there are 4 trainable components to it: awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. Did I ever tell you guys? I think I did a long time ago. That I went my mom was into TM, Transcendental Meditation. And so I then, of course, was into TM as a kid. And so I went for, I guess, a little over a year, something like that. I don't remember how long it was. I lived in Fairfield, Iowa, where I went to Maharishi school for TM. And she was there at Maharishi Institute. I don't know, whatever. But anyway, so I grew up with meditation being a practice. And I'm going to tell you here in a little bit too. I might as well just tell you now. So recently, like this last week, I went and bought myself, y'all, it's on sale. This is like one of the best purchases I have made in I don't know how long. I went and it's a Sharper Image steamer spa room. It's this past weekend, it was on sale for $100. $100. And it gets super hot in there, and it's enough space where I can stand. I'm short, I'm only 5'2", but like, I can stand, I can sit, they give you a little chair. Anyway, I have been going in there for 15 to 30 minutes a day. And it's changed I feel better, more energized, but also clearer minded. I have more energy. I've got more focus, all the things. My parents, both of them, I'm predisposed to high blood pressure, even though I've got really good habits. I have a blood pressure monitor at home, and I'm always aware of where my blood pressure is because of that. It's a silent killer. But anyway, and especially after what we've been through, y'all, like having a constant cortisol coursing through your body, high blood pressure wouldn't be surprising for many of us anyway, depending on your age and genetics. And steam rooms, wet saunas are proven to lower your blood pressure. Anyway, it's the best thing I ever bought. $100, y'all. You should go get yourself one. Thank me later. Oh, the reason I said that is because of mindfulness and meditation. In that time, at first I was like, what am I going to do with myself for 15 minutes in there, 20 minutes, 30 minutes in there? I didn't know if I was going to be able to take it because I'm pretty go, go, go. And it's been so amazing. Just chilling in there. It's been my little vacation. It is. It's my reward at the end of the day. I'd actually have done it in the morning too. It puts me to bed at night and it wakes me up after a workout in the morning. I've done both ways. Social connection. There's an 85-year study of adult development from Harvard. Okay. This is the strongest evidence to support. The longest running happiness study found that the quality of relationships is the single most important predictor of long-term happiness in health. What does that mean? It means that, yes, maybe with your kiddos, things are not good right now. And of course, not so great with your ex, I'm gathering. Creating relationships, a sense of connection. You define what relationship means to you. I need to say this because some people think, like I have close friend connections, but they don't live close to me, like in this town. Okay. Most of I've got friends in Austin. I mean, they're all like, I talk with them on the phone. So long as you feel good feelings, you feel a sense of love inside you when you speak with them and about them, and you know that you have support, it's all in your perception, right? And also, when I think of the podcast like relating to you, and I know it seems crazy because I never understood this when podcast hosts would say this. Like my coach used to say this years ago on her podcast too, that like she felt connected to us with us. Also, Amy Porterfield used to say that she felt connected to her audience. And I was like, what is she talking about? How could she feel connected? But she can't see them. She doesn't know what's going on with them. I completely understand it now. And the relationship I have with y'all, it causes me to feel love and to feel good and to feel motivated and all the good things. Like I get into a flow state when I'm writing my outline and when I'm talking with you sometimes. Not always my flow state when I'm talking with you, but many times I am. And that creates a sense of connection inside of me, you know? So you decide what social connection means for you. But anyway, the social fitness, which is the ability to build and maintain relationships, outperforms genes like your predispositions, social class, and IQ in predicting happiness in this Harvard study, that 85-year study. Even brief micro connections where you're making meaningful eye contact, exchanging genuine smiles, appreciative texts, whatever it is, boost oxytocin and mood. So like I said, you define what social connection means for you. Acts of kindness, also very strong evidence to support that performing, listen y'all, 5 acts of kindness on 1 day per week for 6 weeks increases happiness. 5 acts of kindness for just 1 day a week for 6 weeks increases your happiness set point. The helper's high creates neurochemical rewards that boost your baseline mood. I love that they call it the helper's high. Physical activity, of course. Strong evidence to support this. Exercise releases endorphins and reduces stress hormones. Even small amounts have outsized effects on mood. So I have so much data here in all of these different studies and research. There's the PERMA model, comprehensive framework. PERMA is the acronym, right? P is for positive emotions. E is for engagement, flow states, like I was just kind of referring to. R is for relationships. M is for meaning and purpose, creating meaning and purpose. And A is for a sense of accomplishment, okay? Research shows interventions targeting any of these 5 components are effective at increasing happiness and reducing depressive symptoms. Listen, for us in ambiguous grief, savoring practices, deliberately extending positive experiences for at least 20 seconds. So, like, let's say you have a positive experience and it's like one of those micro moments. If you deliberately extend it for at least 20 seconds, it helps to transfer them from short term memory to long term memory, creating a happiness reservoir to access during difficult moments. You hear me? So just moving your little exchanges from 5 seconds or 3 seconds to 20 seconds will transfer all of those moments from short-term memory into your long-term memory, creating a reservoir, backstock to access during difficult moments. Both and journaling, as I already talked about. Write daily statements that hold both truths. I'm grieving and I'm finding moments of joy. Micro joys practice. Research also shows that the frequency of positive experiences matters more than the intensity of positive experiences. So scheduling 5 to 15-minute pleasurable activities daily, those small regular moments sustain your mood longer than waiting for occasional big events. Okay? Now, as I say that, I think of my daughter back when she was little, itty bitty, like 2.5. And I took her, it was me and my friend Kat. We took our two littles to Busch Gardens in Texas, in San Antonio. And we spent the whole day there. Like, it was a long day for the kiddos and they were exhausted. But at the end of the day, I told her before we went, we're going to have a big day today, honey. It's going to be a big day, big day. And at the end of the day, I had to drag her out of the park and she was in tears. She was so tired, but she kept saying, big day, mama, big day. Like, all she wanted to do was continue the big day. And it's not big day anymore if we're leaving, you know? I don't know why. I just I told you all these like memories are coming back to me. But anyway, the big days like that are great, but make sure that you're not just holding out for the big days. Also schedule these little baby little things. 2 a day, 5 to 15-minute pleasurable activities daily. Okay? Back to my sauna, my steam sauna. 2 of those a day, or 1 of those a day and 1 of something else a day. For me, it's working out or a conversation with a friend, whatever it is that you love to do. So as you guys know, post-traumatic growth framework, research shows that struggle can lead to growth in 5 domains. Let me just say that I want to stress that it can lead to growth in 5 domains, meaning that you'll have to choose it. You're not wrong for not choosing it. It was like a double negative, but you know what I'm saying. And it's not like because you're believing that, oh, this was always God's plan, or this was it, what was in the cards for me. Although I do trust that for me, that's just my choice. But you don't have to believe that this was always going to happen if you don't want to. You could just decide that though you hate that alienation has happened, you wish if you could go back today and change it and make it never happen, you absolutely would. But now that we're here, also you have a greater appreciation for life now than it did happen. And you appreciate just more things that maybe once you were oblivious to, or you just were not grateful for. So greater appreciation for life. You have stronger relationships as a result of the significant lows that you experienced during alienation, right? Another domain is a new sense of purpose after this whole calamity, like ongoing grief and everything. Now you have a sense of purpose. That's definitely for me. I have a totally new take on life and a new sense of purpose, right? Helping y'all. For increased resilience, for sure. Right now that you've gone through all this, maybe before where you were a bit naive and there was, even the little things bothered you. Now that you've been through this, the little things don't really even touch you anymore. And also a more meaningful outlook on how you choose to see the world. Those are the ways that there's just 5 ways. There's subcategories to those. But anyway, this doesn't minimize, like I said, this doesn't minimize the pain. It acknowledges that growth and suffering can coexist. Okay, what I was kind of just saying. Doesn't mean that you have to love what's happened or that it lessens your pain or that you should be thankful for the pain or thankful that alienation happened. No, not if you don't want to. It's just that you can actually beat suffering or have suffered and also experience growth. Okay, so in closing, y'all, I just want to say that the research shows that happiness can be changed. Your happiness level can be changed. And I believe the way that I see it is that now that we have experienced this extreme low, as you may have heard me say before, I feel like to the other side of the spectrum, we can experience the highs that we never felt before. So where some people say, I'll never experience joy again, I think the opposite's true. Okay. It's like, well, now that I've experienced this far on the sort of as the pendulum swings, this side of it, then of course I'm going to experience the other side of it. Right? This created a whole new on either side set of levels for me to experience. So happiness can be changed not by denying your grief, but intentionally building practices that support your well-being alongside it. So because of this grief and like having gone through this, now I've really created this infrastructure that support my own well-being and maybe other loved ones in my life, their well-being too. I'm able to be there, be present for my life now that all of this has happened because I've now rebuilt myself from the ground up. That's the way that you can look at it if you want to, The goal isn't about getting over it, but to live well despite the ambiguity. Live well. I wrote that, and to live to your fullest despite the ambiguity. Okay? So that's what I have for you guys. This supports everything that we talk about, that alienation does not have to define you. And the alienating parent now has not won for the rest of life because now they've ruined your life and forever, and this is always how it'll be. Not if you don't want it to be. You can intentionally raise your happiness set point to higher than it ever was prior to alienation. And again, we're not thanking alienation or the alienating parent for this. It just has been a byproduct of this. Now we've dug that deep to build ourselves back up in a more complete, full way. So y'all have a lovely week, and I will see you next week. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening today. If you like what you're hearing and you'd like to hear more, please make sure to click subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. Also, for bite-sized clips and tips, be sure to find me on TikTok or Instagram. See you next week.